Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer. Today we're here and we are back for the late game segment of the Amanator A to Z challenge series. In the mid game we did a lot of religious combat, we were able to stabilize our religion, and now at this point in the game we are looking to go for a science victory. So picking up the late game, we started off with discovering chemistry, which unlocks the research lab for us, a very strong late game unit in terms of giving you science yield. If you also remember in the last episode, we started constructing Mausoleum, which is a very good wonder for science victory. So in this game, I saw that we could faith purchase a great engineer that would give us some bonus production towards producing wonders. So I went ahead and I bought them with faith just to kind of basically guarantee that we get Mausoleum. Also, at this point in the game, we do want to be going for Roar Valley. So that is another good thing that we could get out of using a great engineer. One thing that I do want to mention is that whenever you, with Mausoleum, whenever you finish building a wonder, you actually will, if you use a great engineer to build it, it will give you +1 charge on all of your existing engineers as well. So it's essentially a free charge if you use a great engineer charge to build Mausoleum. Yeah, then I used Gustav Eiffel to build the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. Once again, a very strong late-game science wonder. I guess it's, well, really a mid-game wonder. But then did unlock Industrialization, which unlocks the ability to construct Roar Valley. So I was planning on getting this in Pharos, because Pharos has a lot of mines. It's already by Petra City that's very built up. So I started to go for the production of a factory in this city, just so that way I would meet the requirements for building Roar Valley. Then also had a little bit of a dust storm that went and destroyed some of my stuff in some of my districts as well. Actually destroyed quite a lot of district improvements and tile improvements as well. There's kind of a pattern in this episode of there being lots of natural disasters that happened this late in the game, probably because I had a lot of coal power plants and was producing quite a bit of CO2. I also finally remembered to use Jesuit Education to purchase science buildings with faith. So if you remember in the very first episode, we took this as one of our religious beliefs, but I hadn't used it too much up until this point. But now at this point in the game, when I have all these cities that are not super strong in terms of production, but I have all these potentially really good science buildings, I was using my excess faith to just purchase the science buildings, get a ton of extra science return out of it for very cheap. I did also start promoting Magnus to get to vertical integration. If you're playing a science game, vertical integration is very good. It makes it so that the aura effect from factories will stack in the city that Magnus is on, which means that you get a ton of extra production in one of your cities. So I wanted to get vertical integration on Magnus and then put him in Pharos. Got my first coal power plant in Pharos to give me tons of extra production and also start producing power. So that was pretty nice to power up my cities there. Gives a little bit of extra science on certain buildings, such as the research lab whenever they're powered. So this was pretty good. I did have a ton of coal resources in this game as well. So that really was not a limiting factor for me in this game. Unfortunately, I also did notice that Roar Valley was actually already built, so I unfortunately was not able to get it in this game. It's a wonder that you should try to go for in science victory games, but sometimes if you're a little slow like me in this game, it'll already be built by the time you reach industrialization if you don't prioritize it faster. So instead, since I had many things already built in Pharos, didn't really need too much more, I just started to run some campus research grants. And at this point in the game, I had to start getting to computers because both the tile that I had Mausoleum on and also the tile that I had one of my campuses on was going to flood as I was producing CO2. So I wanted to make sure I got the flood barriers fast enough to be able to prevent this from happening in the city of He. And that will certainly become a little bit of a storyline throughout this episode as we go on. Then purchase some more science buildings with faith, once again, to just help these cities out that really have very little production and would take normally a ton of time to produce these buildings. Might as well just buy them with your faith. Changed up my policy cards after a bit. You can see I ran Craftsman. They get 27 bonus production on a lot of my coal power plants, which is really a strong bonus. Then just ran some other things kind of for some random amenities because none of the other policy cards that I had at this point were particularly appealing to me. Eventually did reach rocketry, which is very important because this is what allows us to put down the spaceport and also start producing some of the projects that you need to run in order to win the science victory. So in Pharos, I then immediately switched to producing my spaceport to just get working on this science victory. I was then able to get Carl Sagan as one of my great scientists, so pretty good. He gives 3,000 bonus production towards space race projects. Not quite as good as some of the engineers that will give you a percentage-based boost, but still, this basically means that you can get a free space race project because most of them are below 3,000 production. And also on the same turn, I saw that I could recruit Robert Goddard with Faith, which gives a 20% production boost towards space race projects. And with Mausoleum, this means I can use him twice to get a 40% boost towards space race projects. So of course I purchased him with Faith because this is a very, very strong late game science great engineer. And then, of course, obviously activated the bonus twice, got my 40% bonus towards space race projects, and I also did start to produce the flood barriers in hoping that I would be able to get them up before the natural disaster, or before the sea levels rose even more. Did have another potentially devastating flood in Faros, but luckily at this point I had built a dam there, so I fortunately was able to save all my farms from getting destroyed for like the 8th time in this series. So yeah, build dams if you can, because they can save you a lot of headache whenever you're going for a lot of tile improvements along a river. After a few more governor titles, I was able to get vertical integration on Magnus, which was also really good, so I got that, and then I switched him over to Faros, where I want to have the big production boost in the city I'm going to be building the space parts in. I also did meet Geneva, which is a really good scientific city-state whenever you're not going for war, because they just give you a flat-out, I think, 15% science bonus whenever you're not at war with anybody. And you can see at this point I had been hoarding envoys because I really didn't have any city-states that I wanted to put my envoys in. So whenever you reach that point, you can kind of hoard your envoys until you find a city-state you want. So I had 13 envoys, and I just dumped them all into Geneva because that gave me suzerainship, which gave me quite a bit of extra science. Actually, about 100 extra science. I went from 411 to 538, so huge bonus by finding Geneva at this point. We then entered the Atomic Era, and I took Heartbeat of Steam as my dedication bonus. It gives me some extra production towards Industrial Era Wonders, and it also gives me a bonus production equal to the adjacency bonus on my campuses as well, which is pretty strong, because I did have some pretty decent adjacency on my campus districts in this game. I was also able to build my Earth satellite pretty fast, so I got vision of the entire map, met the rest of the remaining players in the game, and yeah, and this also started the first of the required projects for the Science Victory. I did also meet some additional scientific city-states, so at this point I wasn't really able to get suzerainship of them, so what I did was I just put in a few envoys into each to get some bonuses on my libraries and universities. This is what you should be doing. You should kind of spread your envoys out in order to get the bonus on as many, or to get the stacking bonus on your buildings, and then you can go for suzerainship on 1 or maybe 2 city-states if they have really good suzerain bonuses. Then, of course, immediately started on launching the moon landing project in Faros, because that's the next for my Science Victory. I also took a look at the Great People, saw that Sergei Korolev was next for the Great Engineers, so I was kind of eyeing that up to make sure that I would be able to get him. Over in Heh, unfortunately, the sea levels rose, so my time in order to produce the flood barriers increased to now be 24 turns, which is very irritating because the climate is going to worsen in less than 24 turns. So at this point, I was trying to figure out something I could do to try to be able to save these tiles. And I mean, as you can see, I was at risk of losing both Mausoleum and a pretty decent campus, so I really wanted to make sure that I was able to save these before they totally flooded. Eventually switched my government to communism. I think that this is a pretty good one in this game for going for Science Victory. You just get a lot of bonus production and some science as well in your cities with governors, so it's obviously very strong both for building space parts and then also just for getting you further in the tech tree to make sure that you're able to get to some of those later techs that you need. Changed up my policy cards here, just ran a bunch that I thought would be very good for helping me out with a Science Victory. There honestly weren't that many that I felt like I could add in that would make me significantly stronger, so I kind of just ran some random ones for some of these. A few turns later, launched my moon landing, which gives you a massive culture boost. This is okay. I mean, if you haven't reached the Tier 3 government yet, it's pretty good, but since we already had a Tier 3 government, the extra culture boost really wasn't that impactful for me. Then, of course, use a bunch of my faith to purchase Sergei Korolev, so that way I had him as a backup. I was also researching nanotechnology to get me to the Mars colony mission as well. And also, after finishing that, I immediately found smart materials, which is really good because this is what you need to be able to launch the exoplanet expedition and then start the countdown towards your Science Victory. So I started working on the Mars colony, and then I used Sergei Korolev to just immediately finish that one. It basically just finished it in a single turn, which was obviously very good. And at this point, the only thing I was looking for was my exoplanet expedition and then the laser station, so it's basically just a beeline to do that at this point. You can also see that right here in there are 10 turns left until I will finish my flood barriers. So I took a look at the climate screen and saw that the sea level was supposed to rise in 5 turns, which meant that I still wouldn't be able to build the flood barriers, which was pretty annoying. Eventually finished the research on smart materials, and then of course immediately went for the exoplanet expedition and used Carl Sagan to just immediately launch that. So at this point, there's a countdown of 50 turns until I win the science victory. So right now I was basically just looking to go into the tech tree to find the laser stations. You can see that nobody else was really that close to winning any type of victory, so I was pretty confident. The game is basically already won at this point. Now it's just a matter of how fast can I get there. So whenever you reach this point, I would suggest that you just immediately click to research towards the last tech in the tree, because the laser stations are almost always one of the last techs in the tree, so you might as well just go for that. So that's what I did in this game. And then, of course, the sea levels rose, and it took, and they added an additional 10 turns onto the construction cost for my flood barriers. So this was very irritating for me, because now it was going to take 16 turns again, which is not what I was looking for. So what I did was I started to reduce my own CO2 output by building some windmills and some solar panels, because this will increase the number of turns between the rising of the sea level. So I was hoping that at this point, if I built enough of these, I would be able to delay the sea level rise to the point where I would be able to finish these flood barriers. And now with some of this, you can see that we were up to 13 turns until the sea levels rose, which is still slightly less than what it was going to take me to finish these flood barriers. So I knew that I had to build at least a few more renewable energy sources to try to help this out a little more. And with an additional solar panel, this then went up to 16 turns, which meant that I would be able to finish the flood barrier before the sea levels rose. But of course, before that, we then, of course, had a horrible natural disaster. Even though I was immune to flooding on the floodplains, I was not immune to the Haboob dust storm, which came in, destroyed 6 tiles, removed 3 population, and then, of course, on the next turn when it moved, destroyed even more. So it was actually one of the worst dust storms I've had, because I had so much stuff built up in this desert. So a big dust storm like this actually was pretty detrimental. And then finally, a few turns later, I was able to finish the flood barrier, which made it so that way the mausoleum was safe, as was my campus. So I, of course, immediately started to repair my campus, get those buildings back online, and increase my science return once again. I mean, I guess at this point, the game was basically already won, so it was just for the sake of kind of fun, but still, it was a nice feeling victory to be able to finish these flood barriers before everything was totally flooded. A few turns later, I was able to get to Off-World Mission, which gives you access to the laser stations. So I just tried to spam these in as many cities as I possibly could. So you might as well build the Lagrange ones whenever you have aluminum, but you're quite often only going to be able to build 1 or 2 of these at a time, and you're going to have to resort to the terrestrial laser stations instead, the ones that use the power, just because they're a lot easier to get up and running. So then, yeah, as I mentioned, at this point, once you reach this point in the game, you might as well just spam these things as much as you possibly can. So for the next many turns, I basically just built as many laser stations as I possibly could. I had 2 spaceports going. I had one in my capital and one in Faros. So between those 2, I was able to just spam out a ton of these laser stations and get things going pretty well. And once you get farther and farther along with this, you can basically get to the point where you will win the game in, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 turns. So after a few turns, we were then able to achieve our science victory, meaning that so far we are 2 for 2 in the A to Z challenge. We won the game as Alexander, and now we've won the game as a Manator as well. So hopefully we can continue this success in the next one whenever we play Ambiorix. But yeah, so thank you everyone for watching. I have been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for some more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.